Considering the fact that education is the best legacy one can obtain in life, it stands to the reason that educators should be highly appreciated for their pedagogical effort. Find out about the first African American teacher to teach openly and the first African American to be hired as a teacher and later promoted to the level of a principal. It was Robert John Mahan, an educator, who told us that the best teachers are those who pass on their zeal and enthusiasm as a legacy to their students. This means that teaching is beyond simply sharing knowledge. It is more about inspiring growth. Historically, bond servants, popularly addressed as slaves during the slave trade era, hardly acquired education. This fueled the passion of an African American woman to educate others. Despite her little knowledge, she became the first black woman to undertake the responsibility to teach both young and old on how to read and write, including many colored soldiers. This young woman is Susie King Taylor. Taylor was the first African American to establish the first free African American school for children and teach in a school for former slaves. Besides, she became the first African American woman to teach a free school in Georgia. During the day, Taylor would teach more than 40 children, and at night she would teach adults. How old was she at this time of her life? She was only 14. By the way, it is difficult to trace the very first black American teacher who taught openly before Taylor. Indeed, there were other African Americans who taught in secrecy owing to the regulations which prohibited education for blacks. On August 6, 1848, Susie King Taylor was born as Susie Ann Baker. She was the first of 9 children. She was born into slavery on a plantation owned by Valentine Grest on the Isle of Wight in Liberty County, Georgia. When Taylor turned 7, she, along with her 2 siblings, were granted the permission by the owner of the plantation to move in with their grandmother, Dolly Reed, in Savannah, Georgia. The change of location helped Taylor to receive her elementary education in secrecy. Meanwhile, under Georgia law, it is illegal for enslaved people to be educated. Notwithstanding, Dolly was unwaveringly supportive of her grandchildren's education. She even sent them to a friend named Mrs. Woodhouse. This woman taught them along with 30 other children. This method of learning was designated as underground education. Then they continued to learn from another free woman, Mrs. Mary Beasley, who taught them till May 1860. Additionally, she received further education from her playmates. Taylor's education ended when she was forced to return to live with her mother on the Isle of Wight in 1862. Shortly after, her grandmother was arrested for singing freedom hymns at a church meeting during the Civil War. With the escalation of the war, it was not long enough before the Isle and its environs were captured by the Union Army. Taylor, her uncle, and his family had to flee to St. Catherine Island, where they received protection and a transfer to St. Simon's Island. During the transfer, she was asked by the commander of the boat, Captain Whitmore, if she could read and write. Guess what? She proved it by writing down her name and her origin. Her ability to read and write fascinated the officials on the island. She was assigned to teach the children on the island. Taylor married Edward King, a black officer in the 33rd United States Colored Infantry Regiment, where she served as a nurse and laundress. During their free hours, she taught them how to read and write. After the Civil War in 1866, Taylor and her husband moved to Savannah, where she opened a school for African American children. Sadly, Edward passed away a few months before their first child was born. The loss of Edward left Taylor in absolute devastation. She had to cater for herself, her unborn child, and to make matters worse, she lost some of her students to newly opened public schools. To make ends meet, she decided to work as a servant for a wealthy family. In the early 1870s, she moved with this family to Boston, where she met and got married to Russell Taylor. Additionally, she served with the Women's Relief Corps and became its president in 1893. Interestingly enough, she wrote a book about her experience in the Civil War, Reminiscences of My Life in Camp with the 33rd United States Colored Troops. The book was privately published in 1902. She lived the rest of her life in Boston and passed away in 1912. On the other side of the coin, Bessie Burke was the first African American to be hired as a teacher, and she advanced through the ranks to become a principal in the Los Angeles State Normal School, Lance. She was born in 1891 and passed away in 1968. But before her passing, she attended Berendo Elementary School and graduated 7th in a class of 800 pupils. By 1911, Burke has received her training credentials and became the first black teacher in the Los Angeles public school system. She began her teaching career at Holmes Elementary School and became the first black principal in 1918. Following a rapid rise, she became a principal at Nevin Avenue School in 1938, making her the first black principal to lead a racially integrated school. Burke served in a number of civic organizations and eventually retired from the Los Angeles Board of Education in 1955.